Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar hosted by Ringover and OneUp. So I can see some people are already joining the live, which is great. And feel free to say a quick hello in the chat once you've connected. We would love to hear where you're from, which business or agency you're representing. Let us know. So just going to give more people some time to join, maybe 15 seconds or so, and then we will jump straight into today's session. And we're hoping that it's going to be a very valuable one for all of you who are on the live. And to those of you who will be watching the replay, we haven't forgotten about you, but we thank you for signing up. Really appreciate that. So once again, thank you for joining us. This webinar is brought to you by Ringover, your AI-driven conversation platform for recruiting and staffing. And we are partnering with OneUp, which is your sales performance management, reporting, simplified reporting platform to help boost your sales performance. And for those of you who are joining me for this webinar series, for not the first time, I want to say welcome back. But for those of you who are brand new here, I just want to tell you a little bit about our Adapting to Win webinar series. Our mission here is to equip you with all of the tools, the insights, the knowledge, the inspiration that you need as a staffing or recruiting professional to be able to really drive better business development outcomes, to win new business, and to enhance your client and candidate engagement. So that's what this is all about. And in today's session, we will be discussing the topic of AI and gamification, two interesting subject areas. And we'll be touching on how you can use both of these to unlock a new level of recruiter motivation and performance. And to dive into this topic today, I am being joined by two amazing gentlemen. I see those smiles very well. So firstly, I'm joined by Jason Lawson, and Jason is a partner ecosystem specialist whose mission is to help firms, drive better business growth and to enhance, the work that they do, especially within the staffing and recruiting sector and space. And Jason has a wealth of knowledge that spans over 20 years of experience. So trust me when I say that the insights that he's going to share today, you can trust that they're golden. And we are also joined by none other than Chris Atkin, who is the VP of Sales at OneUp. And Chris, he's a very established player within the sales and sales leadership arena. So we're really excited to hear what he will add to today's conversation around AI and gamification. Okay, so just a quick note for the audience. We will be having a question and answer section just at the end of the session. So feel free, if you have any questions, to drop those in the chat. You can find the chat tab just in the bottom right panel on your screen. So feel free to share anything that comes to mind. No question is too simple for us to respond to, okay? So we can all benefit from any question that you're going to ask during today's session. All right, guys, so are you ready? Let's dive straight into today's topic. And the first question that I want to really throw out to our panelists, and Jason, I would love if you can, just kick off by telling us, What are some of the most significant trends that you've been seeing in the use of AI and gamification within the recruitment industry?
Thanks, Janelle. And firstly, before I begin, that's a fabulous introduction to a webinar, probably one of the best I've seen. So really appreciate the kind words too. So yeah,
You're welcome.
AI and gamification, like in terms of particularly around AI, I think there's three key trends that I'm seeing, and it's evident when you look at LinkedIn and you go to conferences. One is automation, two is data, and the third is the business development. So automation, there's been a lot of great recruitment technology and processes for many years, in fact, about how to automate repetitive tasks, to really look at what are the processes that are repeatable and be able to add process and AI and automation to that. So I think that's something that is always continuing, and it will be something that will get better and better as more technology and process comes to that. And what that does is really allow the recruiters to focus on the more strategic aspects of their role. It's that client engagement, it's that candidate sourcing. The second, data. Any good AI automation strategy needs that data hygiene, that the inputs, garbage in, garbage out. So really thinking about how to build out that wealth of data, make sure it's accessible to all the different tools you've got, and that will allow more intelligent matchmaking between roles and candidates. Getting better predictive analysis of hiring outcomes. So really allowing the AI to learn off that quality data. So bringing in specialists, seeking consultants to really help figure out what is that transformation that you need in your business. And then the third really is very much around the topics we're talking about today, and I look forward to hearing from Chris in terms of gamification and OneUp sales, and that's really about the enhancing the communication and really getting more communication-driven insights. So your recruiters are having many conversations right throughout the day. How do you aggregate those and get insights and take business decisions to really improve and grow the business?
Awesome. It's all about data, getting more of those insights that really matter. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think particularly from a gamification standpoint, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we've had gamification in recruitment as well as sales for quite a long time, specifically in the form of competitions, incentives, and so on. It forms a pretty key part of any recruitment or sales culture. And I think one of the kind of key trends I'm seeing is actually just more of it these days. It's becoming much more common, I think, to gamify the hard yards of recruitment and sales, especially when I think markets are just a bit tougher, aren't they? And actually the business growth is so much more reliant these days on business development, and where you can't just rely on existing client relationships maybe as much as you could previously, and actually digging deep to find clients is what's going to grow the business. Let's face it, recruitment is hard, sales is hard. The ability to pick up the phone again and again, like in the face of rejection, is a pretty brutal concept. So we use gamification of our day-to-day to mitigate this, to drive those right behaviors, to combat those peaks and troughs. And I think the other kind of trend that I'm seeing with leaders in recruitment today, that they're starting to move away, and this kind of plays into that data side, but moving away from kind of running competitions and trying to just get a sense of how effective they've been by just, how loud the room was on the day. I've been guilty of this, of previous roles running sales teams where I stuck some big incentive on for a sales week and tried to judge how effective it was just by how much noise my people were making in the office, But actually, like now, what I'm seeing is that drive to understand the data that sits behind it, to look at trend analysis, to better run competitions based on where leaders know their people tend to kind of, put the brakes on, for example, at the start or end of a month or a quarter, and then running analysis to compare the impact of running those types of competitions versus a period where they hadn't, and then seeing what leads or polls. And that's, I think, where it gets more interesting, especially when you start to do stuff like A/B test.
Yeah, That's really, really interesting. And I think it's a really good segue into, the second question, which relates to, what staffing and recruiting agency problems do gamification and AI help solve? And Chris, maybe you can lead off on that one.
Yeah, of course. So I guess I touched a little bit on this already,
Yeah.
but I think part of kind of gamifying performance, it's to mitigate the peaks and troughs of recruitment, to drive performance when we know numbers historically have been down. Like what it does, it gives a level of control and management over something inherently seen as quite uncontrollable in some ways. That ethereal concept of motivation. And motivation's a funny thing, in itself, it's quite fleeting. Like motivation is never permanent, it's temporary, it's created by all sorts of things, whether it's a personal drive because if I don't make enough money, I can't pay my rent or my mortgage, this month, through to I listened to a podcast that just got me fired up, this morning. But regardless, there's always this limit to it. So what gamification does is to help manage and control this by kind of tailoring and targeting periods of kind of company-driven motivation at key times where we know it may lapse, as an example, where it could be the end of the quarter where everyone's more focused on closing placements, deals, not necessarily on building things like new business. But then if we kind of flip this on its head and drive a competition, for example, that focuses on BD, whilst obviously not taking our eye off of kind of closing key deals, it means we hit the following quarter with pipeline to work with, rather than kind of a bunch of wins, but nothing in the pipe. So we're kind of starting from scratch. And not to kind of go too much onto this, but that in itself is, I think, where those peaks and troughs really come from. It's that constant cycle of building, working, and closing even that leads to the ups and downs. It's all part of the system, the factory line. So going back to the point, that gamification is a way to help control that process, drive the right behaviors when it matters, so that it makes sure that we as commercial people are constantly focused on every aspect of the cycle, rather than say just kind of one stage at a time.
Yeah.
Only I'll quickly mention is the other key area is probably being able to target like specific levers that we know will drive revenue. It's not just about timing in itself. It's also about understanding the pipeline stages, the funnel, like where are we weak? Where are we lacking? It's so easy to just say, let's do better. Let's generate more revenue next quarter, for example. But the biggest question is like, how? Doing what? So being able to dive into that data and understand like where are we weak, be it from a conversion ratio perspective or a set of metrics, to see like where the numbers not add up is pretty pivotal. And if we can analyze those numbers and then see where is that issue, like where is it? Is it a case of there's just not enough inputs to generate the outputs? We know to focus our time there.
Yeah, good. It helps to sort of create that, to balance off the results and also to give you an extra pair of eyes as well. Jason, do you see any other, sort of challenges that maybe AI in particular helps to address?
Yeah, and just to pick up on Chris, your points there, and I absolutely agree in terms of leading indicators, and certainly from a communication point of view, whether it's driving phone calls or interviews, the whole pipeline or the way that candidates are taken through the pipeline of multiple interviews, and how to actually look at those and really drive those the right behaviors that are going to drive the performance. And then, I think the other things which really do matter in terms of problems and things that can be solved through AI and gamification is, we all know, recruitment is, as you say, Chris, before, it's a tough business. The economy is, in a challenging climate at the moment. And so it's really about retaining and engaging, your recruitment team. And certainly, I see a lot of use cases where OneUp sales is a key tool for doing that. And then I think the other one is really, tools like Ringover. You've got that core coaching, and you've got ways to actually look at analytics of inputs, process, and how each rep is really, recruiter is performing, and which ones, looking for the signals of what drives performance, what drives outcomes. And then I guess the obvious one since COVID is the hybrid and remote. So many agencies are working with today. So again, having these tools that can be great insights for leaders and managers. And I think that's something that we hear time and time again, that just having that, an element of control, of course, but it's also having just visibility and insight.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for those responses, guys. And I just want to jump straight into the third question that speaks to practical examples, using gamification to help boost recruiter performance. Chris, can you share just a couple with us?
Yes, of course. I mean, I've probably nattered on and covered some of this, so I'll break it down in a slightly different way, maybe. So I think one is actually just understanding your data. You've got to understand your metrics, understand your levers to pull. This is ultimately what will tell you what to run your competitions on. Which of your metrics are struggling, which are lagging behind, where are your ratios strong that it requires more volume to drive growth that I can then gamify. Is it our ACV, our average contract value, that's lagging? Can we create a competition to incentivize larger placements over smaller to encourage the right behavior? Is it actually the fact that we've got an excellent delivery model that's firing on all cylinders, but actually what we need is just more to work with? Do we target jobs added? Do we break this down further and then understand what's the lagging metrics, stopping more jobs being added? You kind of get the point. And I think it's also targeting the periods of time where, as I've mentioned before, where you've trended underperformance in certain areas. If you can isolate this and then mitigate it with kind of cleverly timed competitions and incentives, you can start to level out that inconsistency of performance, those peaks and troughs. I think also being mindful of things like what prizes you use for competitions and incentives. And I think that's overlooked quite a lot, but actually everyone is different. So trying to find, a prize, end goal that's going to suit everyone is pretty tough, really. But if you can hit the majority, you've done well. So actually it's very much about trying to be inclusive with what you're doing and the prizes you're putting in place, or even, doing things like offering a choice of prizes for the winners to choose, because let's face it, there's nothing more demotivating than a competition with a prize you actually just don't want. And then finally, I would say just be conscious of the time frame of your competitions. If it's too long, you'll likely have someone take the lead and all of a sudden motivation will drop from other consultants who think, actually, do you know what? I've got no chance of catching up on this. You can mitigate this not just by doing things like shorter durations, but also if you want to run stuff like longer competitions, which I do advise, just make sure that you've got prizes, maybe not just for first place, maybe the top 5, for example, depending obviously on the kind of team size. On the other hand, if it is too short, you may not see that desired impact, as ultimately, it may be a case of everyone starting to move up the gears and get into the pace, and then the brakes suddenly come on. And ultimately, if it's just too short, the target metrics, that they've got to be achievable in that time frame. Usually when you're doing those kind of shorter kind of burst competitions, sales days, whatever that is, it's much more focused on things like the inputs rather than the outputs, stuff like calls, meetings booked, and so on, rather than, stuff like revenue and placements, as an example.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Jason, I have a question for you that is more on the AI side. Can you share some maybe common AI tools and features that staffing professionals can actually start using now to enhance their performance?
Sure. So I think, with any of these types of, predicaments of, which tools and how to plug it into your existing business, I think it's always worth, sense checking, where will it fit in my process flow, my workflow? How's that data, both in and out of that tool, fit again with that whole data strategy and the AI and automation strategy? So I think, there's features and benefits, of course, but there's also the greater, process and workflow that really, I think absolutely needs to be underlined, right throughout this discussion. But in terms of, again, like I said, from the top of the webinar, there's a lot of great tools that have been really proven and right throughout, whether it be temp staffing or permanent. Obviously, all the sourcing and screening tools, the resume and CV passing tools. So a lot of great ways to I guess, process and filter and source and screen candidates. I think, where I see a lot of agencies really striving for that next step is how to create that ideal candidate experience. A lot of the tools have been driven to help the agencies, and rightfully so, they're paying for these tools. But I think, certainly in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been, a lot of awareness that, a video interviewing tool, sometimes it's good for the agency, but maybe not so good for the candidate. And so how to really look for those features and benefits that are going to help that candidate experience, because that will drive good outcomes for your client. And then, again, the great benefit and features of OneUp and Ringover, I think, are worth just calling out here, and just in terms of the power of the business development, which is, repeatedly over the last 12 months just been such a rally call from nearly every recruitment agency I speak to or see online. Winning new clients, retaining, and also, how to get those placements, into the books and completed. So it's really that 360 process, but really it starts with that business development. And I think there's a lot of, opportunity for agencies to really lean into that, whether it be the reporting, the dashboards, the gamification, and the calling side. There's a lot of insights that can be, driven into the CRM, the ATS, which again helps those business decisions and performance management.
Yeah, excellent. And this question that I'm about to ask you again, Jason, I think it really ties into the previous one. Just kind of going back to the basics now, for those who are new to AI, what are some of the first steps would you recommend that they can start taking to integrate AI into their recruitment strategies?
So, I think the first steps are, be curious, lean into it, embrace it. Of course, everyone's thinking, is AI going to take over, the whole agency or roles? Certainly, I think, the general thinking is certainly in the next 5 or 10 years, it'll be the recruiter or the agency that works with AI that will be, winning in the market. So I think, start small, be curious, get onto ChatGPT or whichever flavor you're interested in, learn, adapt. So I think it's really being agile to it. And again, not to reiterate the point too much, but certainly, AI can be super powerful, but it's most effective with a solid foundation of good data, data that's really coming in from good sources. And again, another benefit of AI today, as it gets more intelligent, is actually taking unstructured data. So that's phone calls and messages, for example, and turning that into structured data that can go into custom fields in the ATS and CRM. So you're starting to take a conversation with the candidate and they're mentioning their salary, their notice period, some experience. Through that conversation, those items can be put through into specific fields and start to have call summaries and really reliable information that you can refer back to. So I think those certainly many of the things I'm hearing in the market and from customers and agencies. So certainly worth looking into those.
Thanks a lot for that. I think it's all relevant points, and it's relevant to consider as well. Sort of where do you start? Because sometimes the topic of artificial intelligence, especially when you really spell out the acronym, it can seem like such a heavy topic and an expensive one at that for some agencies to implement. And maybe the smaller ones might be thinking, no, we're not there yet, we can't. But there are simple ways that you, like Jason mentioned, that you can integrate it into your workflows from taking conversations and getting more data out of those conversations to sort of feedback into, your recruiters day to day. It can help. It can help to increase performance and productivity in some way or the other. So thanks for that one. So we did mention, I think it was Jason, very briefly regarding, that period we all went through, in COVID, during COVID, having to work remotely. And there are some agencies who are still doing it. They never went back to the office, and that's totally okay. So the question is, how can recruitment technology, including AI and gamification, of course, be effective for teams who are remote or hybrid? Chris, do you want to share some insights on that?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think a prime example really of where gamification plays a key part, at least like this, in terms of like home working and remote, I think a big part around gamification is about culture more than anything else. It's about creating and driving that performance culture where you've got that healthy balance of competition, support, team spirit, kind of fun, but then that standard of excellence, at the forefront. And look, when you're not in the office, what happens is, you've got that risk of losing that natural osmosis of culture, from just being around people, being around your colleagues all day. So being able to foster this takes more work. But actually, I think it's pivotal. Like, it's pivotal in the world that we live in today, where really hybrid is probably more the norm than not, in reality. So most competitions today, they're still run on whiteboards, spreadsheets, bells, gongs, that sort of stuff. I've used all these things in previous roles, which by all means, they can be super effective, to a degree. Although I would say they've got limitations, both in office, but then obviously at home. But looking specifically at those working from home, it's so easy to get separated, to feel isolated from that performance culture, to suddenly have a disconnect, from that competition, for example, that everyone's talking about in the office that has that buzz. And where technology plays a part is its ability to bridge that gap.
Yeah,
I think that's all technology really is. It's bridging, it's the ability to create that connection between those at home and those in the office, as well as like multiple offices across the board. Like, let's face it, like for me, culture is not measured in days and weeks. It's measured in seconds. And you need to feel part of that culture every second of the working day to really be firing on all cylinders. And competitions are very much a part of that, and gamification, ultimately. The technology that can automatically track progress without input, that can provide visualization on, where it's at, who's overtaken who, when a placement lands. All of these things, what keeps consultants, what keeps reps engaged, and thinking about those right things and then driving those great behaviors that ultimately lead to growth.
Yeah. Totally agree with that response. Thank you. I see we have a question in the chat from Blake, and it's quite similar to the next question that I'm going to ask. So I'm going to ask Blake's question instead, because I think, your response can really help Blake here. So that question is, how do you integrate gamification and incentives for a recruiting or sales team? That's the part one. Part two is gamification or competition alone sufficient to motivate a workforce? Or does the game need to specify a winner and a prize to be effective? So Chris, this one is for you, of course.
Of course. I think it's a really good question. And do I think incentives and competitions alone are enough? No, I think they form part of a wider part of that performance culture ultimately. And I can touch now on kind of those types of incentives and I guess the part that they play, but there is a mixture really between the kind of individual, the competitive type incentives that you get versus the collaborative. And some of that is based on culture, I will say. Some companies will operate in a very non-competitive culture internally, and actually it's very much collaboratively working together to achieve a common goal. And there is nothing wrong with that. There's no right or wrong. It's just right for the company. You get other types of environments and cultures where actually everything is heavily competitive, and that's what drives that workforce. And you also tend to find talent will be naturally drawn based off their personalities to one or the other anyway. So I'll dive into this question because that might help answer this anyway. I touched on some of this a little bit, but as a quick list around, I guess, the types of incentives that typically I've seen anyway be most effective in motivating people. So you've got the kind of quick fire competitions. So we call them leagues in our platform. So they're like sales days, that you kind of drive the inputs and the start of the funnel, particularly around stuff like BD activities, client meetings booked, things like that. So they serve a great purpose, really, to get everyone, as an example, if you are hybrid or in office, like into the office for the day, and then feeling that performance culture around them, targeting quite a key time where maybe, I don't know, BD tends to be quite weak. So you're strategically trying to grow that pipeline to mitigate that potential trough and then help foster that kind of team bond built on healthy competition. You've then got the other side of that, those kind of longer competitions. So they could be running over, I don't know, a quarter, maybe even a year, if you're looking at stuff like the Recruiter of the Year. So these tend to usually anyway be more focused on the outputs over the inputs, so revenue, placements, that sort of stuff. But obviously you can base this on all sorts of things depending on your priorities as a business. And, with stuff like this, you get that amazing feeling of overtaking the top performer, that long marathon, that kind of race that pushes consultants to want to be the best. And let's also face it, like, avoid being the worst. It's a way of driving accountability without cracking a whip or maybe pushing the culture in a direction you don't want to, but you also want people to be accountable for their numbers and want to push themselves further. It's that way of driving motivation past just earning commission and unlocking that seventh gear, which relates back to that question of, no, I don't think gamification competitions are alone on their own, but we build remuneration kind of packages to drive that behavior. And I think that can get people to target, sure, but how do you unlock that next gear? Like, how do you get someone to push beyond that to achieve above and beyond? And that's where stuff like this comes in. Really quickly, because I'm conscious of time, but team versus team is another one. So stuff like office versus office, depending on the size of the business, especially if you're doing stuff like average team performance to make it fair across the teams. It's a good way of getting people to band together. It also mitigates some of that kind of risk you get where if you're doing quite a competitive individual one, some people lag behind and then feel like, I'm never going to win first place, so I'm going to give up. But you get them working collaboratively together and contributing to a common goal, that can really work. Same with an overarching collaborative incentive. So we call those missions in our platform, for example. So that kind of touches on stopping that lagging of performance, but it means everyone's working towards that common goal of, I don't know, going away as a team somewhere, unlocking a benefit, going to the races, whatever that happens to be. And it's good for those companies that maybe don't want to have, I don't know, quite competitive cultures, I guess, within their organizations, but they still want to unlock that growth.
Excellent. I trust that answers your question, Blake, and I think it does. But if you have a follow-up question, feel free to type that in the chat again for us. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to move on to the eighth question here. And Jason, I know it's around, incentives and competitions, but I think we can all sort of, give our insights here. How do we combat the risks of driving the wrong behavior when we're trying to, create good from using competitions and incentives in general for motivating recruiters?
Yeah, I think, Chris has touched on some of these points already in terms of that culture and the decisions around individual gamification versus teams. I think that those are certainly, really valuable ways to think about, not getting the wrong behavior, because if you have all individual, certainly in my experience, it can become a bit divisive between the team. So I think, ways to combat the risk, having clear rules around what the competition, what's the performance, knowing the boundaries of how to achieve, the set goals. I think, certainly promoting healthy rivalry is important. Recruitment is a sales type environment. So I think, everybody, should acknowledge that, it is a competitive environment, if not within the team, it's to other agencies. Mm-hmm. And then I think, the other parts is really think about, yes, this is about a gamification to help, drive motivation, productivity. and also, you know, promote it as a culture of learning and improvement through that too, because, you know, it's almost like in a game, right? In an online game, you're moving levels, you're growing to the next stage or next phase of your you know, recruitment career. So I think, you know, a lot of those things. And then the last one I think is about communication, right? Any sales leader, Chris, recruitment leader, it's all about communication. So yeah, I think those things to me are really important.
Lovely. Chris, do you have anything to add on to that? I know you probably covered some in your previous response as well.
Yeah, of course. I was not sure about this. So I've heard this a few times before, to be honest, and it's a good question and it's a good concern. You know, that worry, if I use competition to drive performance, what if it just leads my people to chasing the incentive? Maybe even doing activities for activity's sake rather than kind of for winning that competition, rather than working towards like a revenue goal. And I get that. And actually this all comes down to being strategic with your planning, strategic with your competitions, both in terms of timing, but also like what you're targeting your competitions on. So this breaks down to multiple parts, such as understand your ratios to know like where are you successful at the moment, and thus if you put more volume into those types of metrics into that funnel, that will drive results over targeting an area that maybe you already know you don't get good conversions out of, and which you may want to address and fix that first before you start incentivizing and driving and trying to pull that lever. It comes down to the metrics in terms of what you're targeting. You know, you should ultimately always be targeting metrics that you know that is going to drive to revenue, you know, not just using metrics for metrics' sake. In fact, the more fixed and focused I think competitions tend to be in terms of what you're kind of targeting, the better they tend to run. Using technology for this can help as well. So using stuff like point systems for metrics means that you could put in stuff like, I don't know, less points for inputs and more points for outputs, meaning you don't end up in that position where someone is winning by doing more activity that didn't actually lead to anything, whilst rewarding that consultant that did more activity, sure, but also they generated more outputs like client meetings, placements, and revenue, and so on. Finally, I think it's also understanding that the competitions really are kind of supplementary to targets. They shouldn't be running in parallel, but with no relation. Every competition should be aligned to the goal of hitting or ultimately exceeding target. Again, to reference that kind of timing from earlier, using a competition to build pipeline in a historically poor pipeline building period with the strategic intention of ultimately mitigating that risk of missing next month's target because everyone is hyper focused on hitting this month's target, as an example.
Yes, I totally agree with that. So we're winding down. And the last question, which is not the least question either, is I want both of you, we'll start with Jason, just share 3 tips. If you had to tell, you know, any agency leader, you know, these are the top 3 things that you should do if you're looking to really, really make or enhance your business development success in the next quarter using gamification or AI. These are my top 3 recommendations. What would that be?
So yeah, as a wrap up, yeah, I'll keep it to kind of 3 key sort of tips as the question asks. Yeah, the first really is, as I was saying earlier, you know, really embrace AI, gamification, you know, thinking about how does this fit for your agency? And in terms of business development, I think early on, keep it simple, but be curious. You know, invest in the training and the feedback from your team. Map out the process. So really embrace that early stage. Get it, you know, making sure it feels right to you and your business. The second, it's about the data. It's about the continuous improvement of how are those inputs and how are they leading to these outputs. So, you know, A/B testing when you can, iterating. So again, it's that journey, and it's very much a strategy that you need to think about the business development. You know, getting that feedback loop from both your recruitment team and clients. And then the last one is, you know, there is a wealth of information out there in terms of best practice, and there's you know, obviously a great amount of recruitment technology companies like OneUp Sales and Ringover really investing into this sector, investing to really make staffing or recruiting agencies succeed and perform. So I'd certainly look at a lot of the webinars, but just a lot of the LinkedIn content too. There is actually a wealth of information and best practice on a daily basis. So I think it's an ever evolving environment. So I think it's remain agile, keep your ear to the ground in terms of what's the new ways of working. But again, embrace the change.
Embrace the change. I like that. Chris, what are your top 3 tips for any agency leader who's looking to improve their business development success using gamification or AI?
Cool. Okay, I'll try and keep it short. One, I think, be data driven. Be data focused so you can be strategic with your competitions. Data ultimately, it's the source of truth to understand what levers you need to pull and when. Without the underlying data telling you this, you're at risk of flying blind, shooting in the dark. And I think it's always better to make that educated decision on what's actually going to turn the dial. Second, I think A/B test your competitions and also change them up regularly. Just because something maybe has worked in the past doesn't mean, doing the exact same thing is going to repeat the result. In fact, almost certainly not. I'm not saying, reinvent the wheel every time, but mix up the prizes, mix up the teams, evolve the format, while still maybe keeping that key structure that made that competition really successful last time. But I think that's key to making sure that you've got continued engagement, you've got continued kind of driving of results. From an A/B standpoint, I do think it's really important to kind of benchmark competitions against each other, analyze why certain competitions maybe were more impactful than others. Was it the prize? Was it the timing? Was it the structure? Whatever that is, and being able to pinpoint that so you can replicate and model on that success is really crucial. And then finally, probably feel like I'm making a bit of a shameless plug here, but I'll go with it. I think that really, I'm a big believer in technology. I wouldn't be working in tech otherwise. I believe that technology is not just about making our lives and our jobs easier. It's about making them better. Why work in the tech in the first place? The reason I think many competitions and incentives fail or maybe even never get launched, it's the hassle. And they're a lot of work. It's the work to get them launched off the ground, to track and report on them, to drive the engagement from consultants with them so they can take them seriously, and it's going to generate the results that they want. It's a hell of a lot of work to make them effective. So, and also you've got to do that consistently over time. It's a lot. So my belief is, if you can, cut the corner with technology, let someone else do the heavy lifting.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sure the audience, they can take these tips and implement them, ASAP and see some results. So I'm really, really appreciative of that. Thank you, guys. So everyone, we've just ended the question, the series of questions that I've prepared for our panelists. And now we're just wrapping up. But before we do so, I just wanted to sort of, introduce or reiterate who we are as hosts of this webinar today. Ringover is your AI-driven conversation platform that really integrates some of the widest, the widest range of communication channels in the market, from calls to texting to video, calling, WhatsApp, social media, analytics, all in one platform to help you have better and more meaningful conversations with your clients and candidates. So if you want to get in touch with us, if you want to see how Ringover can benefit your agency, feel free to reach out to Ross, who's our country manager for the UK market. His contact info is right here on the screen. You can also find him on LinkedIn. Drop him a message if you want to, just see Ringover for yourself and how it can help you, drive better outcomes for your business and team. And of course, OneUp, which is represented here today by Chris, is your sales management, performance management platform with simplified reporting, analytics, and visualization, all in one place to help you drive a high-performing sales team. And if you want to learn more about how OneUp can help you, of course, with your gamification needs as well, if you want to see or test it out in your agency, just see how it works, Chris is the right person to speak with. His contact information is right there on the screen. I encourage you to reach out today, not tomorrow, today, so that you can set up a call and see how OneUp can help you. So, any other questions from our audience? And I think I've seen one come in from Hannah. Thank you so much. And this question says, can you give an example of how you've seen gamification encourage a recruiter or sales team member that is struggling? That's part one. Part two says, I know you have touched on this a bit, but have you found that there's a common thread that motivates struggling team members instead of intimidating them? Sorry.
Cool. Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, go for it, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So first bit, yes, for sure. All sorts of examples actually over time. I'll pull out one example from a previous company. Need to make sure I don't name names. That'd be dangerous. But so one of my good reps, and I say good because actually he could have been much better. He was an excellent salesperson. He consistently hit his target. He did all the right things. However, I always felt that he never really, I think, unlocked that seventh gear. He never really pushed past, where he thought his ceiling was. And there was actually the inherent reason that sat behind that was he is and probably was and probably still is really competition focused. He was so competitive as an individual. What he'd done is he'd worked himself up to be the best in the sales team. And because he'd beaten everyone else and proven everyone else wrong, really, ultimately he just put the brakes on and he would just be like, I'm going to sit here quite comfortably. And he didn't feel anyone was challenging him in reality. So where gamification unlocked that really was the ability to motivate him in a different way, where it wasn't just about I'm the number one person in terms of my target, but actually to pull different levers and understanding that maybe it was driving around BD activity, because I noticed his BD activity dropped off and he just wasn't doing as much pipeline generation because he was a better closer and he could close more of those opportunities that came his way. He didn't work as hard at the other stuff because he felt we didn't need to stay at the top. So building a competition around that kind of input side that I knew would unlock that seventh gear in him, because revenue was actually, it wasn't in that competition. So it was now about BD calls, it was BD emails, it was mostly around booking those client meetings, that sort of stuff. It meant that all of a sudden he had this new fixation, this new focus. And inevitably what happened is the more inputs that came in, because he was jumping to increase his, to get to the top of that podium and win that competition, the revenue spiked off the back of that. And instead of hitting 100%, he hit 180%. And ultimately it was the ability to unlock that seventh gear in him. That would be a good example, I think.
That's an excellent example. Hannah, I hope that answers your question. And does anyone have any last questions before we close off today's session? If not, feel free to reach out to Chris, Jason, or Ross, who I just presented on the screen. You will be receiving the replay just after this live ends, so you will have the content to go through with your teams again. And of course, you can always contact us via any of the channels that were shared if you want to continue this conversation. So I think we can wrap up here. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Chris, for joining me here today and for sharing such valuable, honestly, valuable expertise and insights. I learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience has as well. So thank you once again, and looking forward to catching up again soon. And I say thank you to the audience. See you on the next episode of our Adapting to Win webinar series. Thank you.
Thanks, Janelle.